Cone and Juanita Fike and Dr. Kell. I hope you got to catch all of their amazing sessions. We still have some people who are connecting, looks like. But if you have questions, we would love for you to put them in the chat. We have a few from the Facebook group already that we'll be talking about, but we want to give you the opportunity to ask questions here too. And of course, if you have any specifically for the people who are whose sessions you heard today, then that would be great.
While we are waiting for people to come on, I would love to just have everyone chat, in the chat, just share where they're joining us from, because that's always fun. I know a few people are joining us from Africa. I don't know if they're here today, but I know a few people for the summit are joining us from Africa. So please post in your chat where you're joining us from, because it's just a cool thing that we have technology these days to be able to meet all together from the comfort of our own homes or wherever you might be at. Wow, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Honduras. Cool.
Nice.
That's so fun. Well, we really hope you guys enjoyed the first day of the summit. There's so many great sessions today and tomorrow, and I think tomorrow has my favorite session, so definitely check that out. But there's some really great sessions coming up. So if you think you got all that you could glean from this summit today, unfortunately, you are very wrong. But yeah,
Kate joined us too. So hi, Kate. You're muted, but we can see you.
Sorry. Hi.
That's okay.
Hi.
I'm glad you made it.
Oh, yes. I might have to eat while we're talking because I did not.
That's okay.
Sorry. Good to see everybody.
Yes, thanks for being here.
Great to have you here. Thank you for joining us at the summit.
Oh yeah, it's been. I'm honored. So cool that I got to do it.
Okay, I see we have Kayla from California. Thanks for joining us, Kayla. And Dr. Kell from Pennsylvania. Thank you. Well, it is 7:03. Connie, should we get started here?
Yeah, let's do it.
7:03 my time.
Sure. Well, do you want me to start with one of the questions from the Facebook group?
Sure, whichever one you feel like would be best. Oh, we have Crystal from Missouri. Thank you, Crystal, for joining us.
Okay, so someone messaged me in the Facebook group, and she said that from the age of 2, she has always loved anything romantic. She even had a diary from kindergarten where she was trying to decide which boy in her class to marry. So her question, this is her word for word. I feel like I was born for love. I have wanted this my entire life, but I'm 26 and have never been asked out on a date, except for one April Fool's joke in middle school where a mean boy said, "Would you like to go out with me? April Fools." And that still hurts. I'm seeing friends who said they never wanted to get married, fall in love, and marry, but I'm still here alone. I fully believe God is good. I believe he has the best plan for me, and that may be singleness, but some days I'm content in that, but other days I'm not. I know I'm not alone, but I'm having a hard time making that knowledge and my feelings fit together. Brady said he couldn't understand why God had created him with the same-sex attraction if it was wrong. My question has become, why did God create me this way with this lifelong desire and may not even fulfill it? Or why may I have to wait so much longer than my friends when it feels like I want it more? I have the Sunday school answer to these questions in my head, but they don't fix it. That might be a question for you, Brady, since you,
since they mentioned,
she said she had a moment watching yours. So.
Yeah. And it's so hard going through your 20s when you're seeing all of this stuff happening for all your friends. And it's like, where does this leave me? And as someone who's dealing with same-sex attraction, I'd read through 1 Corinthians 7, and it says, well, those of you who are, you're burning with passion, you should go ahead and get married. And it's like, well, but I can't get married to the people I'm burning with passion for. So where does that leave me? I guess that leaves me alone and single. And so I guess already, like I said, you already know all the Sunday school answers. So hopefully I don't repeat all that. There's times when I said I just can't do it. Like I can't do it. This isn't fair. But one of the things I had to focus on is eternal perspective of God has given me everything I need for eternity, which is Jesus himself. And there is nothing that I'm lacking. And another thing I realized is that, many times God, we hear people say that God wants to give us the desires of our heart. And it's like, that's obviously a desire of your heart. And I had to come to peace with the fact that not all desires are fulfilled on this side of heaven. Sometimes my desires need to change. Sometimes I need to lean into relationships with the church. And there's times when I need to mourn, and it's okay to like pour out my heart towards God of this doesn't feel okay, and really mourn of what I had envisioned for my life that isn't happening. And God, through his grace, brought me through it. And not that, and it's easy for people to look at my stories like, well, I'm married now. It was when I got into my 30s, I got married and I have kids now. And so it's easy for people to say, oh, well, you got what you wanted. And that's what I want too. But it's like, I didn't even meet my wife. I didn't even go on a date till I was in my 30s. So I've wrestled with the loneliness and the singleness and trying to figure out what is my place and what is my purpose for this season. And I think God has a purpose for us in all seasons. And that allowed me to invest more in my church, to invest more in other families, to invest more in my nieces and nephews. The time when my brother-in-law was killed in a car accident and I moved into my sister's house, helped take care of the kids for a while. It's like there was so many areas of life that I could show up in because of the season that God had me in. So sometimes we don't see that in the moment, but in the moment we can cry out to God and be real about our pain and our loneliness, and look for what he's calling us to do in this season.
Any of the other Dr. Kell or Kate or Juanita, anyone want to add to that?
Yeah, so I'm still single, and I totally can resonate with her. I'm a little bit less than 10 years older than her, and seeing all of those same things. And one of the things I know when we first met, Connie, I had said kind of that detoxing part. And so a lot of what I had to do was kind of detox from the 80s and 90s is what I call it. So the songs that were all bred with relationships and being with someone and going through the ups and downs of the drama with that, movies and popular culture, and even like Disney, she said she had a journal from a young age. And so I just think of like the young girls that are like, I'm going to have my prince one day. And like, that's from kids. And, as someone that teaches first grade, I've got kids that are like boyfriend, girlfriend in first and second grade. So I think one, big piece that I would tell anyone that's feeling this way is to just kind of think about the context that we're in. And that for a lot of us, this is like 2-3+ decades from birth of relationship breeding. Now, of course, relationships are great. God ordains it, and that's one thing. But I think to be immersed in that year after year and not realize what that's doing to us is one thing to kind of unpack. So that's one thing I would say is just know we grew up in a society that romanticized, relationships, and even made TV shows and series and movies off of those same exact themes over our trajectory of our living here. So I think one, be kind to yourself because you can't get away from it. And two, one of the things I was actually studying last night was Romans 8:26. And what I love about this section is that as I was looking through the New King James Version and the NIV version is that the section that it's in is about from suffering to glory is the heading that the New King James Version uses. But in the NLT, it's just, something to glory. And I say that to say that we're going to struggle here. And so part of that struggle is wrestling with God. And one of the cool things I liked about reading last night was that it says, in the same way the Spirit helps us in our weakness, we do not know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us through wordless groans. And so I think, again, as we're wrestling to try to move past that point of trying to unlearn some of these things and where do we fit in and how do we rectify the fact that we want something that God hasn't given us, I think that whole passage and reading through that and letting it kind of soak in and apply to us. And so I think that's another piece that might be helpful, is just, again, connecting with the word, but then also about those verses of what to do when we're having a really rough time and when we see things like that. So that's like my 2-part mini answer to that. But I feel her. I've got friends through marriage, even some getting divorced and remarried. Those are also fun ones too. It's like, how did you have time to get divorced and remarried? And I still don't have a date. Like, okay. So I get it. It's real. But those are my encouraging thoughts.
Yeah, I do have a little bit I could say too. I took a lot of comfort when I was single in the story of Hannah, which I have to brush up on this because it's been a while since I've read it. But Hannah was married, and I think she was like happily married, but then he was married to somebody else that was kind of a really mean person. And then she had all these kids. And then, Samuel's mom. Yeah, right. Okay. I think so. Like there's this scene where Hannah goes into the temple and she's just like crying and crying and crying. And, just really wailing to God, to the point that people thought she was drunk. Because, probably because they didn't, that kind of emotion wasn't shown probably in the temple like that. And so people were like, what's wrong with her? Is she drunk, And the thing I love about that story is that God didn't like say, why are you being so ungrateful? Or, and even her husband says, well, can't you just be happy just with me? But I like that she was so honest with God and just wasn't trying to hide like some of the mourning and sorrow she was going through by being having no children, and then that resulted in Samuel, who was the first kind of prophet king who would like change the whole, the whole political landscape of Israel after that. And even then, she gave him to God's work. I think that so much helped me as well. And this kind of relates, is that I just really did see God as like my closest companion, and even like my husband, my best friend, all those things. And in any marriage, there's ups and downs. There's times that you don't understand the other person. There's the times that you have to work through hard feelings. And I had to do all that with God, with my singleness, for sure. And I do, but it's like, but again, like the story of Hannah, that if you were to go to a loving husband and cry and just say, this is so hard, that husband's not going to be like, oh, you're being so ungrateful. Like, I just hate that you're not, like different. You're not acting the right way. A true good husband would, wrap his arms around you and say, it's going to be okay. Like, I love you, and just being able to picture that and know that is the true response of God. Is his response isn't, what some, humans might make you feel, which is, why are you being ungrateful? Like but like, allowing those emotions to be raw and real. Of course, still having gratefulness in the midst of that, but letting God just wrap his arms around you. And I do believe he has so much compassion on every human that suffers, that's why he suffered, himself, so that he could understand our suffering. So I think it's really so good to just come to him and melt in his arms and let him show you the compassion that he has for you.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you, all of you. And I'll add too that the Lord is the potter and we're the clay, and it says that, you know, who are we to say what he makes of us, and he knows what he made us for, and his purposes for us are good. And sometimes our desires are not in line with those purposes, and we don't know that, and we have to get there. So, but we need to get some more questions. So,
Can I add
y'all
one
want to?
thing to the end of that?
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, I'll make it quick. I think it's also just important to note that oftentimes we think we know what we want, and we're oftentimes very wrong. It just happens that way all the time. And so I think as much as we might recognize what we really, really want, we got to understand that God knows much more so what we need and what we truly want. I mean, just a good case in point is how many times have we really been excited about a certain event, and then we go there and we're like, oh, well, that was kind of boring, that was kind of bland, you know? Or how many times have we gone to an event thinking, okay, whatever, I'll do this because it said it'd be here, and then you go there and it's awesome and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I went, you know? Like, we really do not know much what we want, especially when it comes to a future relationship. Like, we have this idea of what we want, but we don't know how that would turn out, you know? Like, say there's a guy who really wants to marry a girl, and so he's like, gosh, God, I really want to marry that girl. And God's like, no, you don't marry that girl. And he's like, but God, I really, really want to marry that girl. Like, God's probably thinking at that point, like, you think you want to marry that girl, but you don't know what's going to happen 5 years from now. You don't know who you're going to become 5 years from now. Like, I know the best situation for you. And as much as you might think you know what that is, like, trust me. And so just for everyone joining us, I mean, God is so good. He's so good. And why do we keep doubting him all the time? I mean, I do it all the time. It is so annoying. It is just the human condition. We doubt God, unfortunately, but like, we really can trust God. And hopefully that's something that we can all learn a bit more so through this summit. But yeah, thank you, Connie, for
Hey,
giving me
Philip,
a bit of space.
it remind me of something that a really wise friend always said. He always said that you don't know what a blessing marriage is until you've been married, and you don't know what a blessing singleness is until you've been married. And so I always laughed about that, you know, because it's like, you're right, we dream about something, and it's like it's so much of just our sometimes idolatry of our picture perfect of what we dreamed it would be. And you know, I always said that everyone says that singleness is a disease and marriage is a cure, but then you walk into a Christian bookstore and like half the books are on how to fix your, you know, dysfunctional marriage. And so maybe it's not the cure all that or the, you know, what it's cracked up to be at times.
That's true. Everything has its pros and cons. All right, so let's answer Anna's question, who is here. She says, I want to believe I will get married and have kids, but the waiting or the thoughts of no, I won't, I'm getting old, and where would I meet that person?
Yeah, I guess I'll start with answering this and anyone else can jump in. Yeah, I mean, first of all, Anna, I just want you to know, man, I understand. I wasn't the oldest. I'm probably, well, definitely not. Juanita's here. She knows she's the oldest single here, probably. Thank you, Juanita, for being here, by the way. I got married at not the youngest age, but a younger age. But I can definitely relate to having these fears, to wondering, because I mean, no one was interested in me. It was annoying. Everyone that I liked someone else, and it was just didn't work out. And so there's just a lot of fears that can come in that season of life. And so I just want you to know that I see you and I hear you, and it is hard, it is difficult, and especially when you have these ideas for where you want your life to go and have no power over getting there necessarily. I mean, we all have a degree of power, you know, like we can step out and take the initiative and all, but like ultimately it lies in God's hands. And so that can be either super frustrating or really encouraging. Because if the power for that rests in God's hands and we can trust him on that, then we don't need to fear as much. Of course, fear will come, and I do a session on this on day 3, so we can talk more about that then. But yeah, fear will still come. But the whole idea of sometimes it's just not in our control. And when it's not in our control, that's where we really need to rest on our faith in God and our trust in God. And for me, I would go back through and read the old Bible stories of situations like David and Goliath, where David totally trusted that God would deliver him. Or other situations like Abraham and Sarah, who totally trusted that God would bring them a child when the time was right, except then they didn't trust God, and now we have Ishmael. But that's where it ultimately all comes down to. And so yes, your concern and your fear is definitely valid, and it's hard, but we can always benefit from relying more on God and trusting in God more to give us peace in situations like that. But Juanita, is there something that you would like to share about this? Because I know this is probably a question that you had to wrestle with a lot. So is there something you would like to share about this? You're going to have to unmute yourself.
Philip, as the host, you should be able to. There, she's unmuted.
Oh, whoops.
I can't think of anything, Philip.
No? Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Philip, I would jump in and say something. So many times we have this picture perfect idea or dream of what something in our life should look like. And many things, and we just build it up in our minds. And then, later we realize that God had something that we never could have imagined that didn't look like what we thought it would look like, but it's so much better. And as I was hearing you, read that question, I was thinking about my friends, Joel and Holly, who have become really, really dear, close friends. They're about 50, and he was married and had 4 kids, and his wife committed suicide, and absolutely tragic situation. And just and sometimes things that we thought, it's a good thing that he knew Jesus, and his hope was not in marriage, because his hope would have been destroyed. But then Holly came along. She had struggled with singleness for up until she was almost 40. And, is God ever going to do something? And she met Joel, and now she's the stepmom to these 4 kids. And that's not the picture perfect image that most people have of creating a family, is marrying a widower who has 4 kids and stepping into the role of stepmom. But God used those years of singleness to prepare her and to mature her and to help her have experiences that were prepared for her to minister to these 4 kids and step into that role. And so I couldn't help but think of that as an example of the picture perfect of what we imagine not happening, but God having a better, sometimes better picture in mind of how he can use us, and how he can use our periods of singleness to prepare us for something in the future that we never thought that we would have in our life.
Yeah, that's very true. And I'm going to tag on to the where would I meet that person, and combine it with another question that's a little further down. It says, we know God is sovereign, but also there's free will. So does God also know who and when I'll marry? And shouldn't I do nothing or exercise my free will to be out there being seen? God, I'm resting on you, but no one's coming through my window. So I'm going to combine the where would I meet someone with that question, and say that I truly believe if we're walking the path God has for us to walk, and he intends for us to get married, that person will be along that path. So our seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added to you. Now, maybe marriage isn't one of those things that it's going to be added to you, because it's not one of the things that's guaranteed to every believer, but maybe it is. And maybe it's just, well, all of us as Christians, our call is to walk faithfully and serve in the kingdom of God where we are. And but I will also say, I don't think there's anything wrong with looking for a spouse. If God can find, was it Isaac and Rebecca? I get the Rachel and the Rebecca mixed up, where he sent the servant out to find a wife, and And so that was, I mean, kind of like online dating, like go find me a wife, just go out there and find one, And so if God can work and find someone that way, I mean, yeah, I think he can work through online dating. He can work through anything. So I don't, but I think that that's a personal individual place, because I know people who have said, I did online dating knowing that it was not the place for me. I knew that God did not want me there. So I think that's a very individual kind of thing that you have to be following the Lord to know, is it okay for me to be pushing for this? Or does he want me to just be living my life faithfully where I am and trusting that he's going to bring that person into my path? Looks like Kate want to say something.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I didn't realize I unmuted, but I did want to say.
Oh, you're good. Okay.
I just remember when I was single, and I didn't get married till I was almost 46, so it was a long journey. And my sister-in-law, who was on a lot of that journey, I just remember her one time saying to me, "Well, imagine if you lost your job and you wanted a new job, and you just like waited in your room for like a job to come to you. I mean, like probably no, you're gonna go out, you're gonna give out applications, you're gonna look for a job, but then the next step is then like trusting God with what happens then," which I agree with that. I mean, I think I agree with that. But the other part is that yes, dating is a part of it. But also a very important thing to do is to keep living, like, and do things like, I worked with homeless people for years. I worked with refugees, and I lived in several communities. All those things were very life-giving for me and helped me to not be so lonely. And not only is that, I mean, that's twofold in some ways. I mean, in some ways that can be better than, even online dating or something, because you're not, you're out there meeting people. And not only are you meeting people, you're meeting quality people who are wanting to, outreach to the community and want to be a part of a community, and you see how they interact with the community. So I think online dating is great too, but and even if you don't meet somebody that way, for me, it really helped me get through all my singleness years to look for communities like that and to be a part of communities where they really cared about being in each other's lives and eating meals together and all that stuff. So yeah, I think it's good to get out there, but you can think beyond just by going on dates and move even beyond that.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll add to it some, because, it's a hard question to ask. And there's a few things that kind of feed into that question of, do I put myself out there more, or do I sit back and trust that God will bring it about because God's sovereign? He'll do that regardless of what I do, First of all, the whole like God is sovereign thing, like we see in the Bible that God is sovereign. So yes, God is sovereign. We saw with Pharaoh, God is sovereign, Pharaoh and Moses, But we also see that God honors us taking a step. He honors our agency in all of it. He works through us working, like, for example, when Jesus called Peter, he said, cast your net to the other side of the boat. Peter would not have ended up with all those fish if he did not cast his net. And so, yes, God is sovereign, but he uses our agency. Joseph would not have ended up in the well if he did not wear that coat of many colors everywhere he went, Like, God uses our actions to lead us down the path you desire. So the question is, it's kind of hard to answer, should you or should you not do something? Because those what should I do questions it's very individual. I can't answer that for you guys. But what I can answer is two parts. One is, oftentimes fears will press you down a path that God has not called you. And so it's important to recognize those things. And those fears can come from many different places. Maybe fears of ending up alone, or maybe a fear of what other people might think. And that fear of what other people might think could force you either to step out more than you ought to, or it could cause you to not step out. Connie and I addressed this a little bit in our book, Single Isn't Second Best, in that people will judge singles for so many things. It's so unfair. And it's really, really frustrating. But some of the things that they judge singles on is so contradictory. They'll say like, oh, you're single because you're not putting yourself out there enough. Or, oh, you're not single. Well, oh, you are single because you're putting yourself out there too much. You're being too desperate, whatever. It's like, so then what do we do? Do we put ourselves out there? Or do we not put ourselves out there? And then there's also the element of dress, like, oh, you're still single because you don't dress flatteringly enough. Or, oh, you're still single because you dress too modest or because you're too immodest. I don't know, whatever it is. Like all these questions we need to bring back to God and ask him. And so probably bigger than, probably bigger than the what question is the why question. And I think that's a question that we can actually answer here, because we need to be asking ourselves, why are you stepping out? Why are you going to that singles mixer? Are you going there because you desperately want to find someone? Are you going there because you know marriage is a good thing and you're open to marriage and you want to find someone and you're trusting God with it? And so you're going to take advantage of an open door. You know, there's many different ways you can answer it as far as why you're doing something. And that's honestly a better way to go about it. I think, I mean, I could be wrong. I'd love to hear the rest of your thoughts on this, but by answering why you're taking a step can help us so much more so figure out whether or not God might be calling us down that path. If that makes sense.
It looks like Dr. Kell wanted to say something on that as well. Yes.
The teacher and me came up with like a 3-letter thing. It's not the cutest, but it'll work for what we're talking about, because I'm also someone that's waiting to be married too. And I think something that worked for me is, I said, like the MSL starter pack. So you need to move, serve, and live and love life. And I think that when we do a combination of all 3 of those things, that the weight, or, you know, thinking about, will this happen or won't this happen, or should I go here so I get this outcome, those kind of things go on the back burner, because we're so focused on moving forward with the Lord. So I'd written down like, moving forward with God means being honest with him, reading his word, building community with other Christians, married and unmarried, that get the journey, or at least are there to pray for you and be there alongside of you. So I think that that could be something great to do in the meantime. Also serving. One of the things that I always love is, I've been studying Paul too, and the fact that he says like he's a servant for the Lord, and thinking about like what that means and how we can apply that same piece to our lives. And that alone can give you a ton of things to do when thinking about how can I be of service, not only in our day-to-day moments, but even in our, walk with the Lord, and in serving people through formal things like volunteering and things like that. One of the ways that I met a ton of my friends was just by serving and running women's groups. So that's kind of how I started. And that took up a lot of my time, to the point where someone was like, oh, do you want to go to a speed dating event? And I was like, no, actually, I'm going to be doing this instead. So I'd rather do that, actually. Or why don't we do this? And I'm like, oh, I forgot I'm single. And this is someone that's ruined friendships from jealousy because people are engaged, and, all out crying on the way home from a best friend's wedding. So trust me, I still struggle, and I have struggled, and I've come a long way. But serving was one thing that definitely changed my perspective. And also living, God, I always tell people, God didn't die on a cross for us to ruminate on the things that we don't have. So I think just by being active and getting close to his word, or things that worked for me to help me think less about those things that I was lacking, and more about what I could be doing with the time that God had given me. So that's my 3 cents. So, because I'm expensive. So 3 cents.
That's good.
There's a comment asking you, Dr. Kell, to repeat the MSL acronym and what that stands for. Could you please do that for us?
Oh, I just said move, serve, and live and love. So like the MSL starter pack. And I think I always tell people, if you're doing like one of those 3 things, that usually will take up enough of your time. So you're a little daring to try to go for all 2 and 3. But I think just doing one of those and passionately really trying, honestly, like a friend legit was like, why don't we get dressed and go do this? And I was just like, honestly, I just don't even feel like doing that. And 10 years ago, no one would have thought I would have said that out of my mouth. So that just goes to show that in time, meaning 10 years times 365 days, that's a lot of time. So in time, those things will hopefully be less and less as you pursue things. If I get married, fantastic. But if I don't, fantastic too, because I got a lot of other things to occupy my time. So I think that might help. So move, serve, and live. Live and love. Yeah, I forgot my own last step. Okay.
Very good. Anybody else want to add to that before I ask another question from the Facebook group? No. Okay. So someone in the Facebook group asks, has anyone experienced specific methods that have had success in welcoming new singles to a church group? And also, is there anything that has helped people return? Philip mentioned in a comment to her also that having food and Bible studies with refreshments helps, but also she said sometimes it can be awkward forming conversations with shy people coming into a new group. So she's looking for suggestions.
I don't think I have the most comprehensive answer to this, but I do have an answer. One thing that I've learned that really helps people desire to be invested in a group is having a personal relationship with you, whoever's leading this group, And so if you see somebody new who comes in, especially someone who's shy, that group atmosphere is pretty intimidating. And so one really effective strategy I've seen be used, and I've done it too, is whenever somebody new comes, get to know them, get their number, and then set up a time to connect with them more so over coffee. That might be easier girl to girl, guy to guy than guy to girl or whatever. But I've seen that be pretty useful, because if they have a pretty strong relationship with you or feel like they know you and can trust you, then suddenly that whole group dynamic becomes a whole lot less intimidating. If say you're a girl leading the group and a guy comes and you don't want to be putting off the wrong sort of vibe, then you can try and find another guy in the group and be like, hey, can you go and reach out to that guy and help him or connect with him during this time, and then maybe get to know him outside of this time, and I'll buy you guys coffee or something. That can help as well too. So that's one idea that I have. Of course, I'm sure there are many other options.
I don't think there's a single solid answer, because I think there's every kind of culture of a church or a group or where you live is very different, and people's personalities are very different. So probably, it's very possible that each different person that arrives might be a different way that you can connect with them. And so I think part of it is building a culture. Like if you have other people who are also in your group, then like a core group that you guys make that part of your group culture, that everyone who walks in the door gets talked to and connected with, like Philip said, in a meaningful way, more than just like, hey, where are you from? Glad you're here. See you later. Like, will you go to lunch? Or I will say for me, I'm not shy, but I am an introvert. So I don't do big mingly groups very well. So what I do, because I still want to be welcoming and I still want to have deep community, I ask one person to coffee or two people to lunch, and that's how I build my community. And that does over time build that. So just those, individual, I think systems are great, but they can only work so far. I think it really has to be individual commitments. So if you can build that into the community that you're growing as you grow it, and have a core team that is committed to that makes all the difference. And I think Brady wanted to say something too.
I think you're good. I think you kind of covered a lot of what I want to say, and I think just I like you said, there's not a one size fits all. So understanding what does this person need from us right now, and kind of poking around a little bit to understand, will they connect with me better one-on-one within the group? Let's start inviting them to some things. But don't expect an introvert to be an extrovert and vice versa. Like, be sensitive to who is this person, and I need to get to know them enough to understand what context they're going to thrive in inside our group, and not put expectations on them that they want to hang out every night, or that they never want to hang out, or we can't put our own personality on those people. So try to understand their personalities, and sometimes we die to ourselves to love them. Even though I'm an introvert, well, I'm not an introvert, but if you are an introvert, you sometimes have to die yourselves and have a little more social time than you naturally would want to welcome and love on a new person. And if you're an extrovert, you need to give someone some space sometimes, and don't expect them to be a part of everything. And so I think loving people where they're at and dying to ourselves, regardless of what comes natural to us, is really key in loving people. Because I mean, marriage is all about dying to ourselves, and disregarding the things that we want, the things that we desire, and we need to be practicing those things whether we're married or not.
Connie, you're muted.
Thank you. I think Morgan asked this question. Rachel Cromer put a link in the chat for helping to build small groups, and she said it helped her. And then Dr. Kell has a note there too, just in case you didn't see those there, if you want to go check them out. Does anybody else want to add to that one before we move along?
I would like to read out Dr. Kell's note, because I know a lot of people are going to watch this recording. When we
Oh
post the
yeah, that's right.
recording, and
Good
then we'll
job.
get the note. But Dr. Kell said, I've done personal notes, texts, and emails to folks individually after to thank them for coming, and basically saying that you look forward to seeing them again. So that's a great idea, Dr. Kell. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, that is a good one. It's non-intrusive, but kind and thoughtful, more than, it's an extra step. So
yeah. Before we move on to the next question, I just want you all to know, Juanita, she's not going to be here the next few Q&As. So if you guys have a particular question for her, someone who's lived 80, you're 85 now, Juanita? Okay, 85 years of singleness. She has lots of experience. So she has a wealth of knowledge that I just want you guys to be able to have access to right now. So if you have any questions for her, now is the time to ask it. Post it in the chat. We'll make sure we get to it. But Connie, I think we had 2 other questions, maybe in the Facebook group or something.
I have one other one from the Facebook group, I think. Yeah. Can you share tips on how to manage time better as a single person? Discipline can be rough because of procrastination, laziness, etc. What are some tips to getting up and consistently making time for God?
I will just chime in on that one a little bit. I think that so many times we use singleness as an extended adolescence of like, I don't have any responsibilities. I can do what I want. I don't have to have any discipline. And I think that practicing maturity, and I love what someone else had said, is like, start volunteering places and make life not about you, is a big part of that. And developing habits of dying to myself, of, man, like, I want every ounce to be wrung out for the gospel, and I want to go to bed tired because I have spent the day serving people in some way. And so I think that a big part of that is like, start serving and make life not about you, and that'll serve you well if you get married someday, and that will serve you well in your singleness, because that's just the Christian life.
Yeah, I think Brady is absolutely correct. And just for me personally, I was much more able to spend time with God and be more disciplined with that time before I got married than after getting married, because now, I mean, following God becomes a whole different sort of thing after you get married, because now it's like, okay, yes, I want to read my Bible today, but that could honestly be a selfish thing if my wife needs me for something. And so I think I've been able to be pretty regular with my quiet times reading God's word each morning. but it's been a whole lot harder since getting married, just because now I have somebody else's schedule that I need to be working it around in a sense. So, but that said, though, sometimes it can be really helpful to have a spouse encouraging you, or even just that raw and honest voice in your life saying like, hey, Philip, you are acting super weird today. Did you have time to spend time with God today? And like, no. And then she's like, you should go read your Bible. So that does help. That doesn't happen all the time. Definitely was a whole lot easier for me to read my Bible before getting married, just simply because of time. So I just I guess I say all that to be like, it's just very easy to, like, any stage of life is going to have difficulties when it comes to reading our Bible. Like, there are always going to be difficulties. I mean, obviously we have an enemy. Satan does not want us to read our Bibles. He does not want us to spend time with God. And so he's going to use whatever he possibly can to distract us, whether that be social media, which, by the way, social media distractions happen with whether you're married or not. Just all these different things, like, they will come up no matter what. And so discipline I guess, to answer the discipline part of that question before I pass this off to someone else, sometimes the best way to be disciplined about something is, again, coming back to that why. Why am I doing this thing? Why is it bad if I don't do this thing? Because if it's just like, I do this every day and that's my schedule, then that's very easy to get disrupted and to get thrown out. So if we remember the why, and of course, everybody's different. I love to read my Bible in the morning. That doesn't work for everyone. I know some people, they're just so tired in the morning until 20 minutes after they drink their coffee. And then, well, by that point, they're already 10 minutes down the road. So, you have to figure out what works best for you and try out unique things, try new things. Like, God does not say, read your Bible every day, pray for 20 minutes before you eat food, before you drink coffee, whatever. Like, he doesn't say that. He says, I want a relationship with you. And just as your relationship with your friends are different from friend to friend, I have friends that I go adventuring with. I have friends that I play board games with. I have friends that I just sit around and talk with. Our relationship with each person is different. So God's relationship with you is going to be different from other people. So figure out what works for you. Do you listen to worship music while reading your Bible? Awesome. That doesn't work for me, but great if that works for you, Do you worship through worship music, or do you compose your own songs? Do you pray, or do you read a psalm and pray through that psalm? Whatever works best for you and your relationship with God, pursue that, because that's your relationship with God.
And I'll add kind of to Philip's, like, remind yourself why you're doing it thing, that I think if we're only ever doing it as a duty, and I was reminded, the Lord reminded me a couple of years ago that we're supposed to delight in the Lord, that there is actual delight in worshiping the Lord and studying the word. And I think whenever we only ever act out of duty and we never let ourselves get to the delight of that relationship, well, it's all duty. It's sort of like if you're always doing yard work, but you never sit out in your yard to enjoy it, well, that yard work feels like a chore, because there's no delight in that. It's just a chore. And so you do the discipline so that you can have the delight. And that's one thing, is that there is often like kind of a hump you have to get over before you get to that delight, until you understand that there is delight there, and the Lord kind of starts showing up in more ways that you didn't expect him to. And I'll also say, for me, it took years, honestly, before I was consistent with every morning, this is what I do, sit down with the Lord. And the reason it changed is because I was desperate. I was really struggling. And I actually was in counseling, and the counselor was a believer and asked me, do you have a quiet time every morning? And I said, no. I said, I do it sometimes, it's kind of, whatever. And she said, well, do you believe that it would help? And I was like, well, yeah. And she said, well, then why aren't you doing it? And so it was kind of like if you realize, no, I need this. I need this for my life and for my, for God to make me who I want to be and who he wants me to be, who he created me to be. So it's about recognizing the priority and importance that it needs have in our lives too, which is part of the why, but also realizing that it's not only a job and a chore, it is a delight. So anybody else want to add to that? Dr. Kill, go for it.
So I love it. As a teacher, time is like my thing. It's like, give me a half hour and I can like teach them like life. But one of the things I wrote down was that you need to know your new BFF. You cannot do everything under the sun. So when it comes to trying to manage your time and fit in this, that, and the third, you're going to have to say no to some things that you want to do. They could be even good things, and not even things are necessarily bad things, but you still have to say no. So that's one little thing you might have to think of, is just that no is going to become your new best friend. And it's okay to have boundaries. Some of the books that have really helped me with maximizing my time is what I like to say, so I actually have my bookshelf next to me. So one is Set Boundaries, Find Peace. Unfortunately, this is not a Christian book, and I gave it to somebody to borrow. This will help you find more comfort and being able to say no. One is a Christian book. The next one is The Emotionally Healthy Leader. What's nice is that this book is given from a perspective of a married minister, I believe, but he also has a chapter in here for singles. And he says, no matter whether you're single or married, your first ministry is your devotion and your time with Christ. So that doesn't change whether you're married or single. So this will help you find boundaries. He does believe in the Sabbath perspective. So that's probably the only thing that, depending on where you fall, might be a little whatever. But other than that, he kind of tells you about how you have to really create spaces and boxes for different things in order to be a leader that is with it, coherent, and healthy when it comes to their ministry. And the last one is Essentialism by, and it's across my room, so I don't have the exact title, but I say that to say all these books help me with realizing that I cannot do it all and that I have to prioritize what is important. So love God is first, love people, and try to, live my best life for Christ. So I say no, and then find ways to just cut things out. And those are some of my go-to books that I tell people that will help you. And they're pretty much bestsellers too. So a lot of people too have found a lot of support and help with them too.
Another tip that I've learned as far as discipline goes is sometimes, when we think discipline, we think like New Year's resolutions, where it's like, I'm going to finish reading the Bible in a year, or I'm going to go to the gym every single day for a year. It's like, oftentimes those just feel so overwhelming. I don't know why most people do New Year's resolutions, but I think one thing that really helps with discipline is taking it one step at a time. Don't be like, I'm going to read my Bible every single morning for the rest of my life. Like, I mean, go you if you can do that. But sometimes the best way to do it is like, I'm committing to reading my Bible tomorrow. I'm going to wake up and I'm going to read my Bible early tomorrow, or right after work, or during my lunch break, whatever. And then that next day you commit, okay, tomorrow, I'm going to do it again tomorrow. And if you keep doing that, maybe you need to set a reminder on your phone in order to do that, but take it one day at a time. And oftentimes that helps so much. Like reading the Bible in a year is great, but it takes a lot of steps to get there. And sometimes I think if you start small and slowly start building up, you can get a lot further, a lot faster than if you start big and then slowly start fading out. So if you start with, I'm going to read 10 verses a day and then pray for 5 minutes, it's not crazy. And then maybe after like a month, you're like, I'm going to read 20 verses a day and pray for 10 minutes. And then after that, you realize like, this is going great. I want to keep doing this. So start small and build up rather than starting big and burning out. You're muted again, Connie.
Thank you, Philip. We did get one more question, and it's for Juanita. So we're going to end with this one. Juanita, did you struggle with loneliness? And if so, how was that need met? And have you found consistent communities which lasted for long periods in your life, or have your communities changed often? She asks because she's scared of living a life without someone who's known her for a long time. You're muted. Can you unmute her, Philip?
I can't unmute her, but
Oh,
I'm asking her to unmute. So
there you go.
I think I did.
there you
You
go.
did.
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah. Well, with an 85-year-old brain, I don't remember everything back years ago. I'm sure there were times when I was lonely, but with family around and with college classmates and friends around and ministry coworkers, I don't remember a lot of loneliness. I think I've experienced more loneliness in recent years. Several years ago, well, I came here in 1985 to Flagstaff, Arizona. And it wasn't too long after that that a good friend of mine came and started teaching at Indian Bible College. And the two of us had an evening meal together every Friday and prayer time. And that meant an awful lot to me. And that happened probably, I don't remember for sure, about 20 years, I think. And then she began going to another church and has developed a lot of other friends. She can still hike the mountain close to me, and I can't hike it very much anymore. So I think I've experienced more loneliness recently than I used to. But I do have friends I'm developing in the church. And one of the things that I just thoroughly love, and it helps to keep loneliness from the door. I think I may have mentioned this before. There's a family in the church that has two little kids, an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. And I usually take them something every Sunday. And probably about once a month or so, they come for an evening together. And I've developed a good relationship with their parents. I can't say that I experienced tremendous loneliness, but maybe a little more than I used to. I try to remind myself that with the Lord, I shouldn't have any loneliness. He's always with me. But we're human too. I don't know if that answers the question, but it's the best I can come up with.
Yeah, I think that answers part of it. And thank you for answering, Juanita. That's a great answer. The other part of the question was, have you found consistent communities which lasted for long periods in your life? Or have your communities changed often? And they're asking because they're scared of living a life without someone who's known them for a long time. So I guess maybe two parts to that question is, have you found consistent communities that have carried on through life with you? And maybe another question, which wasn't necessarily asked, but could be good for you to address is, did you have that fear growing up of like not having someone who's known you for a long period of time or who kind of goes through life with you? Did you have those fears? And if you did have those fears, how do you think God kind of worked with you through those fears or made those fears not necessarily tangible, I guess, or real? I don't know how to say it exactly, but I think you get what I'm saying.
I don't remember having that fear before. And I have had a really good relationship with my family. I have 2 of 4 brothers left, and we are in communication once a week by phone. I have friends at church. That's something that really, a community that has really meant a lot to me. And then, even though I'm not a part of Indian Bible College, I do help to provide lunches there once or twice a month, and I've developed some relationships there. I don't know if that answers the question or not.
Yeah, no, I think that definitely helps. Thank you for answering. And I think part of kind of what you're saying here in answer to that question is, we have families, and sometimes if we don't have a family, we can kind of get adopted into a family to some regard. I know I have childhood friends whose families I've kind of gotten adopted into, even though I have my own siblings, and my parents. But those are kind of people who can be consistent communities for us. But I think kind of an answer to the question, like we can trust God with that. I think, Rachel, as long as be faithful in following God, don't let fear keep you from following God in any regard, and just keep taking those steps. And as you take those steps, you can trust that God sees your heart. He sees your heart much more than you do, far more than I do. And he knows exactly how to work with you through those situations. Sometimes God doesn't always answer what we want per se. And sometimes that's a really good thing. I remember for years, I prayed that God would take away my loneliness, or that God would bring me someone, for years. And God didn't do it for years, And a part of the reason why I think God let me sit in that was so that I would build up a passion to help others not feel lonely. Because now I had that felt need. I recognized I hated that element in my life. And so I do not want anyone else to have to go through that. And so maybe, Rachel, and this might not be the most comforting answer, but it is a good answer, and it could be an answer to your question as well too. If that's something that God's putting in your heart, then maybe one of the reasons why he's putting that felt need in your heart is so that you can meet that need of other people. And very likely by you meeting that need for other people, by being a consistent friend through life with other people, you'll end up having consistent friends through life with other people because you built that relationship with those people through life. So
that reminds me of another thing, a couple of other things. When I go to Indian Bible College, I know that there is a student there who has some learning difficulties, and I always try to befriend her. She's a little hard to become friends with, but her smile tells me that she really appreciates it when I approach her. And I do think that's a very good way. Try to keep aware of people who are seemingly having difficulty interacting with other people, and take the lead in conversations and things like that. The other thing is that I work for UIM International, it's United Indian Missions, and our staff, our missionary staff that I work with, even though they live down in Phoenix and I live in Flagstaff, there's a close relationship there. And we get notices of people's birthdays. And even though I don't know some of the people very well, I try to reach out to them on their birthdays, which I think if I were in their shoes, I would appreciate that. I think that that's a good way to have a different kind of a community.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. For those of you who watched Dr. Kill's session on loneliness today, we talked about the how meaningful it can be just to reach out to people and say, how are you, on a regular basis, that a lot of people don't have that person in their lives. And so it's and over time that can turn into more than just checking in on them once a week. That turns into real relationship over time. So I think we're going to wrap it up. We're over our hour limit, and I'm sorry we won't get to the last question there, but thank you all for being here, and I hope that the ones who can will join us again tomorrow. I'm not sure which of the speakers for sure is joining us tomorrow, but there'll be a few of us here. So thank y'all, everyone.
Thank you guys for joining us for day one. We're excited to see you for day two. God bless you all.